Arya Chen walked through the halls of Kepler 7 station, her human boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. Around her, aliens of all shapes and sizes moved with purpose. Some floated, some rolled, and others walked on legs she could not count. She was one of only 12 humans at the Galactic Defense Academy, and most days she felt every bit of that small number. The station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth. It hung in space between 3 star systems, neutral ground where all species could meet and train together. The Academy took the best and brightest from across the galaxy and turned them into peacekeepers. At least, that was the idea. Arya stopped at the training room door and took a deep breath. Advanced weapons training was her hardest class. Not because the work was difficult, but because most of her classmates thought she did not belong there. Humans were new to the galactic stage. They had only made contact with other species 50 years ago. Most aliens still saw them as weak and fragile. She pressed the door control and stepped inside. The training room was massive, with high ceilings and thick walls designed to contain dangerous weapons tests. Her classmates were already there, gathered around Instructor Vex Thigh. Vex Thigh was from a crystalline species called the Zelani. Their body was made of living crystal that could shift and change shape. Right now, they stood 7 feet tall, their surface reflecting the room's lights in beautiful patterns. Vex Thigh was known throughout the Academy for never making mistakes and never losing control. "Ah, Cadet Chen," Vex Thigh said, their voice like wind chimes. "You are just in time. Today we begin plasma weapon training." Arya found her spot in the circle next to Zephyr, her closest friend at the Academy. Zephyr was a gaseous being who looked like a small cloud of blue and silver mist. They could take any shape they wanted and spoke by vibrating their particles. "Are you sure about this?" Zephyr whispered, their voice like a gentle breeze. "Plasma weapons are dangerous. Maybe you should take the safe weapons class instead." Across the circle, Korthak made a sound like grinding rocks. The 8-foot-tall reptilian was covered in natural armor plating that could stop most energy weapons. He was the top student in their year and never let anyone forget it. "The gas being is right," Korthak said, his voice deep and rough. "Humans are too soft for real weapons training. One mistake, and you will be vapor." Other students nodded in agreement. There was Sylph, whose slug-like body could regenerate from almost any injury. Quar had metal bones that could conduct and redirect energy. Even little Pip, who was only 3 feet tall, had skin that could harden like diamond when threatened. Arya felt her cheeks get warm, but she kept her voice steady. "I passed all the safety tests. I earned my place here." "Tests are different from real weapons," Korthak replied. "When plasma gets loose, it does not care about test scores." Instructor Vex Thigh raised one crystalline arm. "Enough discussion. Instructor Vex Thigh, today you will learn why plasma weapons require such respect." They moved to a secure cabinet and withdrew a device that looked like a small metal sphere with blinking lights. "This is a plasma charge. When activated, it contains enough energy to power a small city or destroy several city blocks." The students moved back instinctively. Even Korthak's armor made small clicking sounds as it automatically tightened. Vex Thigh continued their lesson. "Plasma is the 4th state of matter. It is hotter than fire, more energetic than lightning, and more unstable than any chemical explosive. The containment field around this charge is the only thing keeping it stable." They held up the device, which was now glowing softly. "If the field fails, you have less than 4 seconds before detonation." Arya studied the device carefully. She had read about plasma weapons, but seeing one in person was different. The energy readings on her tablet showed numbers that made her stomach tight. "The key to handling plasma safely," Vex Thigh explained, "is smooth, steady movement. No sudden motions. No panic. The containment field responds to electromagnetic interference from nervous systems. Fear makes it unstable. They demonstrated the proper grip, holding the device with 3 crystalline fingers in a perfect triangle. Your species have different hands, but the principle is the same. Firm contact, steady pressure, calm mind. Zephyr drifted closer to Arya. Your heart rate just jumped, they whispered. I can sense the electrical changes. Are you nervous? Arya was nervous, but not for the reason Zephyr thought. She was excited. For the first time since coming to the academy, she was learning something that felt truly important. This was real training for real situations. Instructor Vexthai set up a practice course. You will each take turns carrying an inactive charge through the obstacle course. This will teach you to maintain control while moving. Tomorrow, we will use low-power active charges. One by one, the students took their turns. Quar's metal hands made the device easy to grip, but their movements were stiff. Sylth's flexibility helped with the obstacles, but they had trouble with steady pressure. Korthak moved with confidence, but his heavy steps made the device bounce. When Arya's turn came, she felt all eyes on her. She picked up the practice charge and immediately noticed something her classmates had missed. The device was perfectly balanced, designed to rest naturally in gripping appendages. Her human hands, with their opposable thumbs and sensitive fingertips, seemed made for this kind of precise control. She moved through the course smoothly, her soft human shoes making almost no sound. The device stayed perfectly level in her hands. She could feel its weight distribution, the way it wanted to move, the tiny vibrations that told her it was stable. When she finished, the room was quiet. Interesting, Instructor Vexthai said, checking their readings. Cadet Chen, your stability scores are quite high. Your species' grasping ability appears well suited to this work. Korthak made his grinding sound again. Lucky run. Wait until the real plasma. Then we will see how steady human hands are. Arya said nothing, but she was thinking. Her people had spent millions of years using their hands for tools, for work, for survival. Maybe that experience was worth more than natural armor or energy resistance. Class ended with warnings about tomorrow's session. As students filed out, Zephyr floated beside Arya. You looked confident out there, they said. But Korthak is right about one thing. Active plasma is dangerous. Promise me you will be careful. Arya nodded, but her mind was already on tomorrow's lesson. She had a feeling that her human hands were about to surprise everyone, including herself. That night, she lay in her small quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were depending on academy graduates to keep the peace. If she could master plasma weapons, she could be part of that mission. The thought of protecting others made the risks seem worth taking. She fell asleep thinking about tomorrow, not knowing that one dropped device would change everything. The next morning came too quickly for Arya's liking. She had spent half the night reading about plasma containment failures and the other half trying not to think about them. The statistics were not comforting. Even experienced handlers sometimes lost control. When they did, the results were usually fatal. She arrived at the training room early and found Instructor Vexthai already there, setting up equipment. The crystalline being's surface was duller than usual, which Arya had learned meant they were concentrating hard. Good morning, Cadet Chen, Vexthai said without looking up. Are you prepared for today's exercise? Yes, Instructor, Arya replied, though her stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. Other students began arriving. Korthak stomped in wearing extra armor plating, which made him look even bigger than usual. Quar had polished their metal hands until they shone. Even Zephyr seemed more solid than normal, their gaseous form tightly controlled. Today is different, Vexthai announced, when everyone was present. You will handle active plasma charges. Low power, but real plasma. The energy is enough to burn through metal or cause serious injury if mishandled. They opened a different cabinet, one with multiple warning symbols, Inside were devices similar to yesterday's practice charges, but these had additional safety features and warning lights that pulsed red. The containment field on these charges is stable but sensitive, Vextai explained. Sudden movements, electrical interference from fear or anger, even loud sounds can destabilize it. Once destabilization begins, you have exactly 3.7 seconds to either restabilize the field or get the charge to a safe distance. Sylth raised a tentacle. What is safe distance, Instructor? For these low-power charges, 50 meters minimum. For full military-grade charges, 5 kilometers. The room became very quiet. 50 meters was across the training room and through 2 sets of blast doors. 3.7 seconds was barely enough time to think, let alone run. This is why we train, Vextai continued. In real combat situations, you cannot always reach safe distance. You must learn to maintain control under pressure. They picked up the first active charge. It was beautiful, in a terrifying way, glowing with inner fire that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The containment field shimmered around it like heat waves. The exercise is simple. Carry the charge from this table to that one, 15 meters away. Keep it stable. Keep it controlled. Most importantly, stay calm. Korthak volunteered to go first, as usual. His armored hands gripped the charge carefully, but Arya could see tension in his shoulders. He took heavy, measured steps across the room. The charge stayed stable, but barely. Its glow flickered several times, and warning sounds beeped from the monitoring equipment. He made it to the other table and set the charge down with obvious relief. Easy, he announced, but sweat was visible on his forehead. Quor went next. Their metal hands conducted heat away from the charge, which helped with stability, but their movements were too mechanical. The charge responded badly to the rigid motion, and they had to stop twice to let it restabilize. Sylth had the most trouble. Their soft, flexible body had no natural frame of reference for the precise control needed. They made it halfway before the charge began destabilizing rapidly. Instructor Vextai had to intervene, using their crystalline precision to take control and safely complete the exercise. Cadet Chen, Vextai called. Your turn. Arya walked to the table on legs that felt unsteady. Up close, the active charge was even more intimidating. She could feel heat radiating from it, and the monitoring equipment showed energy readings that made her mouth dry. She reached for the charge, then paused. Something felt wrong. Not with her, but with Instructor Vextai. The crystalline being was standing closer than usual, and their surface had developed tiny stress lines that had not been there before. Instructor, Arya said quietly, are you feeling well? I am fine, Cadet Chen. Proceed with the exercise. But Vextai was not fine. The stress lines in their crystalline body were growing, spreading like cracks in ice. Arya realized what was happening. The Zelani were incredibly durable, but they could suffer fatigue fractures from too much precise work. Vextai had been handling dangerous plasma charges all morning without rest. Arya picked up the active charge, feeling its weight and heat. The containment field hummed against her palms. Alive, with barely controlled energy. She began walking across the room, focusing on smooth, steady steps. She was halfway there when she heard the sound. It was like glass breaking, but musical. Vextai's crystalline arm had developed a major fracture under the stress of maintaining perfect control all morning. The instructor staggered, their grip on their own monitoring device failing. A second active charge, the one Vextai had been preparing for the next student, slipped from their fracturing grip. Time seemed to slow down. Arya watched the charge fall, its containment field already beginning to destabilize from the impact. Red warning lights exploded across every monitor in the room. An automated voice began counting down. Containment failure detected. Detonation in 3.7 seconds. Panic erupted around her. Korthak's armor locked into defensive mode, turning him into a statue. Quor dove behind a training barrier. Sylth spread themselves thin against the wall, trying to minimize damage from the coming explosion. Zephyr simply dispersed, their gaseous forms spreading too wide and thin to help with anything physical. 3.6 seconds. The voice announced. The fallen charge was bouncing across the floor, its containment field flickering like a dying light. In seconds, it would detonate with enough force to kill everyone in the room and possibly breach the station's hull. 3.5 seconds. Arya looked at the charge in her own hands, then at the one rolling across the floor. Her classmates were frozen with fear, or had taken defensive positions that would not save them. Instructor Vex's thigh was down, their crystalline body crackling with spreading fractures. 3.4 seconds. Someone had to do something. Someone had to grab the loose charge and either restabilize it or contain the blast. But who would be fast enough? Strong enough? Brave enough? 3.3 seconds. Arya made her choice. She set her own charge down as gently as possible, then sprinted toward the destabilizing one. Her human legs, which her classmates always said were weak compared to their armored limbs or energy forms, carried her across the room faster than any of them could move. 3.2 seconds. She dove forward, her soft human hands reaching for the rolling charge. Around her, she could hear her classmates shouting warnings, telling her to get back, to take cover, to save herself. 3.1 seconds. Her fingers closed around the destabilizing charge. It was hot. Hotter than anything she had ever touched. The containment field was collapsing, energy bleeding through in ways that made her skin burn. 3 seconds. But instead of running for safety, instead of trying to throw the charge away from her friends, Arya did something none of them expected. She gripped the charge firmly in both hands and held it steady, using every bit of control her human hands could manage. 2.9 seconds. She could feel the plasma building to critical mass. Her palms were burning, her fingers cramping from the strain, but she held on. She could sense the energy patterns inside the charge, feel the way the containment field wanted to collapse. 2.8 seconds. And slowly, impossibly, she began to guide that collapse. Not stopping it. That was beyond anyone's power now, but directing it, channeling it, using her human intuition for pressure and force to turn a spherical explosion into something more controlled. 2.7 seconds. Her classmates watched in horrified fascination as Arya Chen, the weak human they had all underestimated, stood calmly in the center of the room holding a plasma bomb that was about to explode in her hands. The countdown continued. But Arya was no longer listening. She was feeling the energy, understanding it, preparing to do something that would change how the galaxy saw humanity forever. Arya stood in the center of the training room, holding death in her hands. The plasma charge was seconds from exploding, and everyone around her had either frozen in terror or taken cover. But she was not afraid anymore. Something had clicked in her mind, an understanding that went deeper than training or theory. The charge was hot against her palms, so hot that she could smell her own skin burning. But heat was just energy, and energy followed patterns. Her human hands, shaped by millions of years of evolution for precise tool use, could feel those patterns in ways her alien classmates could not understand. 2.6 seconds, the automated voice announced. She adjusted her grip slightly, feeling how the containment field responded. The field was not completely random in its collapse. It had weak points, stress fractures where the energy wanted to escape. If she could guide those fractures, control where the energy went when it finally broke free. 2.5 seconds. Her fingers found the pressure points by instinct. Every human had this ability, trained into them by countless generations of ancestors who had worked with their hands. Potters feeling clay, blacksmiths shaping metal, farmers sensing the readiness of fruit. All of it had prepared her people for moments exactly like this. 2.4 seconds. The containment field was stretching now, bulging in places where the plasma pressed against its boundaries. Arya could feel each stress point through her fingertips. She pressed gently on one side while releasing pressure on another, creating an intentional weak point in the field's structure. Behind her, she could hear Zephyr calling her name, their gaseous voice tight with worry. Korthak was shouting at her to run, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine fear for her safety. Even Sylph had extended tentacles toward her, as if trying to pull her back from what seemed certain death. 2.3 seconds. But Arya was beyond hearing them now. Her entire focus was on the device in her hands and the energy patterns flowing through it. She could feel the plasma's eagerness to expand, to break free, to release its power in all directions. What she was doing was like trying to hold a star in her bare hands. 2.2 seconds. Her left hand was numb now, nerve endings overloaded by heat and energy feedback. Her right hand was cramping, muscles straining to maintain the precise pressure needed to keep directing the containment field's collapse. But she held on, guided by instincts she had not even known she possessed. The energy was building to critical mass. She could see it in the way the charge glowed, feel it in the vibrations running up her arms. Any second now, the containment field would fail completely, and plasma hotter than the surface of a sun would explode outward. 2.1 seconds. She made her final adjustment, pressing her thumbs against specific points on the device while curling her fingers to create a directional channel. The containment field, already stretched beyond its limits, began to tear along the lines she had created. 2 seconds. Instead of failing randomly, the field was failing according to her design. The weak point she had created was directly above the device, pointing toward the training room's heavily armored ceiling. If she was right, if her human intuition about energy and pressure was correct, the explosion would go up instead of out. 1.9 seconds. The plasma charge began to vibrate in her hands. She could see the energy inside it, writhing like liquid fire, pressing against the failing containment field. Her palms were burned raw now, but she maintained her grip with determination that surprised even her. 1.8 seconds. Around her, the room had gone silent, except for the countdown. Her classmates watched in amazement as the small human they had dismissed as weak stood calmly holding an exploding bomb. Even Instructor Vexthai, despite their pain from crystalline fractures, had focused their attention on what Arya was doing. 1.7 seconds. The moment of truth was coming. Either her understanding of energy patterns was correct, or she was about to die in a flash of plasma fire. But looking at her classmates, seeing the fear in their eyes, she knew she had made the right choice. Better that she take the risk than let them all face certain death. 1.6 seconds. Her hands were shaking now. Not from fear but from the enormous strain of holding the device steady while its containment field collapsed. Every nerve in her arms was screaming, every muscle cramped with effort. But her grip remained firm, her pressure points precisely maintained. 1.5 seconds. She could see the exact moment when the containment field would fail. The energy patterns were clear to her now, as readable as words on a page. The plasma would break free in 1.4 seconds, following the path she had created, channeling upward through the weak point she had designed into the field. 1.4 seconds. The containment field split along her intended lines. Plasma began to leak through the carefully created opening, a stream of pure energy shooting upward toward the ceiling. The device in her hands bucked like a living thing, fighting against her control. 1.3 seconds. More energy escaped, the stream growing wider and brighter. The temperature in the room spiked as plasma heated the air around it. Arya felt her hair begin to singe, her uniform starting to smoke, but she held on. 1.2 seconds. The plasma stream was now a pillar of fire reaching from her hands to the ceiling 20 feet above. The training room's armor plating began to glow where the energy struck it. But the ceiling held. The plasma was going up, just as she had intended, instead of expanding outward to kill her friends. 1.1 seconds. Her vision started to blur from the heat and energy feedback, but she maintained her grip. The device was almost empty now. most of its plasma channeled safely upward. Just a little longer, just a few more fractions of a second, and the explosion would be contained. 1 second. The last of the containment field collapsed. For an instant, pure plasma filled the space between her hands, energy so intense it turned the air around it into glowing gas. The pillar of fire shooting toward the ceiling became a tornado of light and heat. Detonation. The plasma charge exploded in Arya's hands. But instead of expanding outward in a sphere of destruction, the explosion followed the path she had created. The energy shot upward like a focused beam, striking the training room's ceiling with tremendous force but leaving the sides of the room untouched. Arya was thrown backward by the recoil, her body hitting the floor hard as smoke and superheated air filled the room. Emergency systems activated, spraying fire suppressant and circulating fresh air. Alarms blared as station security prepared for hull breach. But there was no breach. The ceiling held, its armor plating scorched but intact. The training room was damaged but not destroyed. And most importantly, everyone was alive. As the smoke cleared, her classmates slowly emerged from their defensive positions. They stared at the spot where Arya lay motionless on the floor, her hands blackened and smoking, her uniform singed, but breathing. She had done the impossible. She had held a plasma bomb steady as it exploded in her hands, and lived to tell about it. More than that, she had saved them all by turning a lethal explosion into a controlled release of energy. Korthak was the first to reach her, his heavy armor clanking as he knelt beside her unconscious form. For once, the arrogant reptilian had nothing to say. He simply stared at her burned hands and shook his massive head in disbelief. The weak human had just done something none of them could have imagined possible. Arya woke up in the medical bay 3 days later. Her hands were wrapped in bandages that glowed with healing light, and machines around her bed beeped softly as they monitored her condition. The first thing she noticed was that she was alive, which honestly surprised her. The second thing she noticed was that she was not alone. Korthak sat in a chair beside her bed, his massive, armored form hunched forward as he stared at the floor. When he heard her stirring, his head snapped up. "You are awake," he said, his rough voice unusually quiet. "The doctors said you might not wake up for a week." Arya tried to speak, but her throat was dry and raw from the superheated air she had breathed during the explosion. Korthak noticed and handed her a cup of water, which she drank gratefully. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked when she could speak again. 3 days. The whole academy has been talking about what you did." Korthak paused, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize. I said humans were too weak for weapons training. I was wrong." Before Arya could respond, the medical bay door opened, and more visitors arrived. Zephyr floated in first, their gaseous form more agitated than usual, swirling with worry and relief. Behind them came Sylph, Quar, and several other classmates she had barely spoken to before. "Arya," Zephyr exclaimed, their voice like a happy breeze. "We were so worried. The doctors said, your hands took damage that should have killed you. But somehow, your bone structure held together." Dr. Helix, the station's chief medical officer, entered behind the students. The tall, blue-skinned alien had 4 arms and eyes that could see across multiple spectrums of light. They carried a data tablet covered in medical readings. "Cadet Chen," Dr. Helix said in their precise clinical voice, "you have caused quite a stir in the medical community. Your survival should have been impossible." They activated a holographic display showing Arya's hands during the explosion. The images were taken by the training room's high-speed cameras, and they showed energy levels that made everyone in the room step back. "The plasma temperature in your hands reached 12,000 degrees Celsius, Doctor," Helix explained. "That is hot enough to vaporize most metals. Your hands should have been destroyed instantly, followed by the rest of your body. But I am still here," Arya said, looking at her bandaged hands. "That is what we have been trying to understand." We ran every test possible while you were unconscious. Your bone density is normal for a human. Your skin is not heat-resistant. Your nervous system is actually more sensitive to pain than most species, not less. Dr. Helix brought up another set of data. However, your motor control during the incident was extraordinary. Frame-by-frame analysis shows you maintained precise pressure and positioning even as the plasma reached critical temperature. Your grip never wavered, never shifted, never lost control. Quor leaned forward, their metal hands gleaming. How did you know where to apply pressure? The containment field collapse looked random, but you shaped it like you could see the energy patterns. Arya thought about that. Even now, she was not entirely sure how she had done it. It felt familiar somehow, like shaping clay or kneading bread. The energy had texture, and I could feel where it wanted to go. Interesting, Dr. Helix said. We consulted with experts on human evolutionary development. It appears your species spent millions of years developing fine motor control for tool manipulation. Your hands contain more nerve endings per square centimeter than any other known species. They showed a comparison chart. Zelani hands are precise but rigid. Korthax species has powerful grip strength, but poor sensitivity. Your human hands combine sensitivity with flexibility in a way that is unique in the galaxy. The door opened again, and Instructor Vexthai entered. The crystalline being moved carefully, their bodies still showing stress lines from the fractures, but they were healing. They carried a formal data pad, which usually meant official academy business. Cadet Chen, Vexthai said, their chime-like voice serious. The Academy Council has completed their investigation of the incident. They want to speak with you when you are recovered. Am I in trouble? Arya asked. Quite the opposite. Your actions saved 17 lives and prevented a station breach. The Council is very interested in your unique abilities. Over the next hour, more people arrived. Academy instructors, scientists, even some off-duty peacekeepers who had heard about the incident. They all wanted to understand how a human had controlled a plasma explosion with her bare hands. The explanation, when it finally came, was both simple and profound. Humans are kinesthetic learners, Dr. Helix concluded after reviewing all the data. You understand physics through touch and movement, rather than just theory. Most species have evolved beyond this, relying on instruments and technology for precision work. But humans have retained the ability to feel mechanical forces directly. Think about it, Zephyr added, their gaseous form excited. Humans are the only species that still makes art with their hands. You shape clay, carve wood, paint pictures by feeling the resistance of the materials. Sylth extended a tentacle toward Arya's bandaged hands. Your species never lost the connection between mind and matter. You can feel what the plasma wanted to do and guide it like it was physical material. The implications were staggering. The galaxy was full of species that had optimized themselves for specific environments and purposes. The Zelani had perfect precision but no intuition. Korthax people had incredible strength but limited flexibility. Gaseous beings like Zephyr could change shape but struggled with solid matter. Humans were different. They were generalists, adapted for surviving in changing conditions rather than excelling in specific ones. What other species saw as weakness, their lack of specialization, might actually be a unique strength. There is something else, Instructor Vexthai said quietly. The Council reviewed the training footage. Your response time from when I dropped the charge to when you reached it was 0.8 seconds. That is faster than most military combat reflexes. I just did what felt right, Arya said. That is exactly the point. You did not think, you acted. Your human intuition processed the situation and found a solution before conscious thought could interfere. That kind of crisis response is extremely rare. As her visitors finally left, Arya lay back in her medical bed and stared at the ceiling. 3 days ago, she had been the weak human that barely belonged at the academy. Now, apparently, She was some kind of unique crisis management specialist. Her hands still hurt, wrapped in their healing bandages, but they would recover completely, according to Dr. Helix. More importantly, they had proven something that no one expected. Sometimes, the softest touch could control the greatest force. Outside her window, she could see ships coming and going from the Academy station. Each one carried peacekeepers trained to handle the most dangerous situations in the galaxy. Soon, she realized, she might be one of them. But first, she had to heal, and then she had to figure out exactly what it meant to be the human who could hold exploding stars in her hands and live to tell about it. 2 weeks after the incident, Arya stood before the Academy Council in the station's most formal chamber. Her hands had healed completely, though she could still feel a strange tingling in her fingertips when she concentrated. Dr. Helix said that was normal. Her nervous system had been rewired by the plasma exposure, making her even more sensitive to energy patterns than before. The council chamber was impressive, with representatives from 37 different species arranged in a circular pattern around the center floor. Some sat in chairs designed for their body types. Others floated in energy fields, and a few existed as pure consciousness, housed in mechanical bodies. Council Director Thane, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes, spoke first. Their voice was translated by the chamber's systems into sounds each species could understand. Cadet Arya Chen, Director Thane said, "You are here because your actions 2 weeks ago have prompted a complete re-evaluation of human capabilities. We need to understand exactly what happened and what it means for the galaxy's defense forces." Arya stood straight, wearing her best dress uniform. The formal setting made her nervous, but she had learned to trust her instincts. If she could handle exploding plasma, she could handle a council meeting. "I did what anyone would do in that situation," she said simply. "But that is exactly the problem," replied Council Member Vorthan, whose crystal body made them look similar to Instructor Vexthai. "Anyone else would have run for cover or frozen in terror. You alone chose to engage directly with the threat." Another council member, a being made of living metal called Ferris, activated a holographic display. It showed tactical analysis of the incident, with energy flow patterns and probability calculations that made Arya's head spin. "Our best scientists have been studying the footage," Ferris said, their voice like grinding gears. "What you accomplished should have been impossible. The precision required to channel a plasma explosion goes beyond anything we have seen from any species." Furthermore, added a gaseous council member whose name Arya could not pronounce, "Your response time and decision-making under extreme stress suggest capabilities we never recognized in humans." Director Thane leaned forward. "Cadet Chen, are you aware that your species is currently classified as support personnel only in our defense protocols?" Arya had known this, though hearing it stated so bluntly still stung. "Yes, Director. Humans are considered too fragile for frontline operations. That classification is now under review. Based on your actions, we believe humans may possess unique crisis management abilities that are desperately needed in our peacekeeping forces." The director activated another display, this one showing incident reports from across the galaxy. "In the past year alone, we have had 47 situations where trained peacekeepers froze or made poor decisions under pressure. Equipment failures, unexpected attacks, natural disasters, all requiring split-second decisions with incomplete information. These are exactly the situations where human adaptability might be most valuable," said Council Member Zix, whose slug-like body was covered in sensory patches. "Your species evolved to survive in changing, dangerous environments. Most of us evolved for specific, stable conditions." Arya listened as the council discussed her people in terms she had never heard before. Instead of focusing on what humans lacked, armor, energy resistance, natural weapons, they were examining what humans had that other species had lost. "There is something else," Director Thane said. "We have been in contact with Earth's government about expanding human enrollment at the Academy. They were quite surprised to learn that one of their citizens had achieved something our experts considered impossible. "What did they say?" Arya asked. "They sent us historical data about human crisis response. Emergency responders, disaster relief workers, military units operating under extreme conditions. The patterns are clear. Humans consistently perform better than predicted when everything goes wrong." Council member Ferris brought up new data. "We also discovered that humans are the only known species that deliberately creates dangerous situations for training purposes. You call them extreme sports, survival challenges, stress tests. Most species avoid unnecessary risk. This suggests that humans are naturally prepared for crisis situations in ways we never appreciated," added the gaseous council member. "Your training methods accidentally prepare you for exactly the kinds of emergencies we face in peacekeeping." Director Thane stood, which in their species indicated a formal decision was coming. "Cadet Chen, effective immediately, you are being transferred to the Academy's Crisis Response Division. You will be the first human accepted into this program." Arya felt her heart skip. The Crisis Response Division was legendary. Elite peacekeepers who handled the most dangerous and unpredictable situations in the galaxy. Getting accepted usually required decades of experience. Furthermore, the director continued, "You will help design new training protocols for human cadets. We want to understand how to properly utilize human abilities, rather than trying to compensate for imagined weaknesses." "I am honored," Arya said, "and meant it, but I am still just one person. How do you know other humans can do what I did?" "We do not know yet," admitted Councilmember Vorthan. "That is why we are expanding the human program. We want to test our theory with a larger sample size." Over the following hour, the council outlined their plans. Human enrollment at the Academy would increase from 12 to over 200. New courses would be developed, focusing on intuitive problem-solving and crisis decision-making. Most importantly, humans would be integrated into mixed-species teams, where their unique abilities could complement other species' strengths. "Think of it as a grand experiment," Director Thane explained. "For too long, we have measured species by their individual capabilities, strength, speed, armor, energy resistance. But real challenges require teams with diverse abilities. A Zelani for precision, a Korthak for strength, a human for adaptability," mused Councilmember Zix, each covering the other's weaknesses. When the formal session ended, Arya was given time to ask questions. The one that bothered her most was simple. What if I was just lucky? What if other humans cannot do what I did? Director Thane's three eyes focused on her intently. "Cadet Chen, luck does not explain your performance. You demonstrated abilities that we now realize are fundamental to human nature. Your hands did not just survive the plasma explosion. They controlled it with precision that our best instruments could barely measure. The question is not whether other humans can match your specific achievement," added Council Member Ferris. "The question is, what other human capabilities we have been overlooking?" As Arya left the council chamber, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 weeks. She had gone from being barely tolerated at the Academy to becoming the first human in an elite program. More importantly, she had helped change how the galaxy saw her entire species. That evening, she stood in her new quarters in the Crisis Response Division wing and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, new human cadets were probably preparing to leave Earth for the Academy. They would arrive to find a very different place than she had, one where human abilities were valued rather than dismissed. Her hands, completely healed now but still sensitive to energy patterns, rested against the cool window. She could feel the subtle vibrations of the station's systems, the electromagnetic fields from nearby ships, even the gravitational pull of distant stars. The plasma explosion had changed her, made her more sensitive to the forces around her. But maybe that was not just her. Maybe all humans had this potential. This ability to sense and respond to the physical world in ways other species had forgotten. Maybe what made humans special was not what they could survive, but what they could feel. The next morning, her first day in crisis response training began. As she walked through corridors filled with the galaxy's most elite peacekeepers, aliens who had previously ignored her now nodded respectfully. Some even stopped to introduce themselves and ask about human capabilities. She was no longer just Arya Chen, the weak human who barely belonged. She was Cadet Chen of Crisis Response, representative of a species that could hold exploding stars and guide their fury with nothing but intuition and determination. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of unexpected crises and impossible situations. For the first time in her life, Arya realized that maybe humans were exactly what it needed.